Hello and welcome back to AP World History and Modern. Today we're going to do our second day on Unit 2.1, the Silk Road. In class, we started with our daily 5. I'm going to not do those today because we use College Board questions. Right, and then once we finished that in class, we went over Caravanserai, and then we completed an SAQ. So that's what we're going to go over today. Explain the causes and effects of growth of networks of exchange after 1200 is what our learning objective is. Right? So causes and effects of growth of trade networks, specifically here, the Silk Road. Right? So in yesterday's class, we watched a video on Samarkand, and it's when you talk about, and I guess I should probably take just kind of a minute and look at this. We're talking about the Silk Road, and we've mentioned this before, kind of towards the beginning, of our course when we were contextualizing Chinese history and kind of the origins of the Silk Road. But we're talking about a revival of the Silk Road. All right, so what's causing that revival? Right? What's the kind of underlying cause of this stuff? So, when you look at the Silk Road, right, we're talking, from China, from Hangzhou, kind of going all the way to Damascus, right, and then beyond both, technically, So when we're talking about the Silk Road, right, we are, let's just kind of draw this as a line, right, like this, right. We have our western Silk Road, right, and then our kind of eastern eastern Silk Road, right, and then we have this kind of Central Asian step. This is both of these are receiving inputs, right, from different places, right? So what we're really talking about is two integrated, kind of trading regions that is reconnecting here, right? That is reconnecting kind of here in the center. And so when we talk about the revival of the Silk Road, right, we know that this thing does diminish during the Tang era. Really, you start talking after the Han Dynasty collapses, you'll see a diminishing of it, but you'll see an increase during kind of the Sui and early Tang, but we'll see a decrease of the significance of the Silk Road during the late Tang as the kind of economic center of gravity shifts in China from Chang'an over towards Hangzhou, right? And then we see more of an Indian Ocean focused economic system when it comes to imports and exports, right, for China. We're also seeing, we're also seeing the Islamic world being more Indian Ocean focused as well, right? So, as China is transitioning, this is during that transition takes place during the Abbasid, kind of the rise of the Abbasid Caliphate, right? So we see kind of a separation of the spheres during the Tang era and the Song era. So when we get into our course in the 1200s through 1450, this first unit, we're going to see a revival of this, and that's because of that X factor that kind of looms over all of Unit 2, right? And that X factor that looms over all of Unit 2 are the Mongols. Okay, so the Mongols are going to be part of that story of revival of the Silk Road trade. Okay, so why does it revive, right? So one is security from strong governments, innovation of transportation practices like the Caravanserais, and innovative commercial practices like paper money, bills of exchange, kind of early banking, right? So the Mongols are largely responsible for all of this, right? So we see increased security, right? I mean, this is, so in class yesterday, we talked a little bit about Genghis Khan, and this very controversial figure, responsible for tens of millions of deaths, up to 40 million attached to Genghis Khan. So how can somebody who is responsible for so much death, be considered, a revival and growth of trade, right? Promotion of security. If you survive that wave of conquest, right? If you were a merchant and you survived that wave of conquest, then the period after Mongolian conquest was a time of economic growth and prosperity. We actually have a word for this, right? Pax Mongolica, right? Or the Mongolian peace, that this region was very safe and secure. And we'll talk about that more when we look at the Mongols, right? But this period was a period of peace after conquest, right? And you need to put yourself into that perspective of a merchant, right? Do you want to, if you are a merchant, would you want to do business? Remember, they have to take their own money and buy their goods. Would you take your own money and buy goods or carry around money to buy goods, right? Would you do that in a place where robbery is extremely common, where there's no kind of legal stability? And the answer is no. That's not going to be. Those are not the conditions that are ripe for economic growth, right? Businesses want to invest their money in places that are that are safe, that are where you're not going to get robbed, right? That's where people want to invest their money in business, in transactions, and we're seeing that on this time period in the Silk Road. Is this becomes a very peaceful and stable, right? Kind of geographic region during the Mongolian rule. All right, so we see that kind of Mongolian peace. We're also seeing the kind of increase in new innovations. Okay, these transportation innovations. The big one of the day is Caravanserai. Right? So this is what we're going to talk about for a few minutes. Right, so this is nothing new. These have been around for a long time, but we are going to see a dramatic increase in them during this kind of time frame, or at least a revival of them during this time frame. And we're also seeing a kind of increase in new commercial practices. All right, so we're seeing banking houses coming in. This idea coming in from the West. Paper money and new forms of transactions coming in from this direction. And you got to keep in mind, you talked about the Silk Road. This is a relay. It's AY. That is a relay trade. Nobody is loading up their goods in Damascus and going all the way to Guangzhou. Okay, it's just not happening. You may go short distances. It's a relay trade. So when you're talking about paper currency or something like that, that's going to be largely on the eastern side of it. All right, but we are seeing bills of exchange and those kinds of practices spreading. All right. So Silk Road. Keep in mind, the Silk Road is simply one of many dynamic trade networks during this time period, and in which both sides are fully integrated into. Right. So just kind of keep that in mind. Right. Indian Ocean trade is integrated to both sides of this. Trans-Saharan trade. I guess not quite as integrated because it definitely wouldn't be from the east side of it. All right. So, but Silk Road, right, that's kind of our focus. So, it is always good to be aware, right, of, it's always kind of good to be aware of the cultural diffusion, right? So, or let's just say diffusion, right? Because it's not just cultural that we need to talk about, but right, your homework last night dealt with some cultural diffusion, but also technological. You need to be aware of the technological diffusion that takes place. You need to be aware of your homework also dealt with some of the human environment interaction, right? Diffusion that takes place, the bubonic plague, right? For example. So always be aware of the diffusion that is taking place, right? When you're kind of looking at this kind of stuff, be aware, right? Gunpowder, paper technology. These are being diffused across the Silk Road, just like silk is being diffused, right? Just like Buddhism is being diffused. So keep in mind what's moving across and which direction it's moving, right? That is an important consideration to kind of keep in mind. All right, so let's talk about Caravanserais real quick, since we're talking about the Silk Road. So in class, we looked at this image. I asked students, what do you think goes on here? And kind of pick out some things and try to describe it. So you spent a minute or two kind of doing that, and then I added this image to it. And is there anything you can add to what you're seeing here and what kind of activities are taking place? And hopefully you can, right? Hopefully you can kind of come up with some ideas. My favorite answer this morning, it was legit. My favorite answer was that they could gas their camels up here. I thought that was a great idea because they're kind of making that connection between a rest stop, like you would see on the interstate, and fueling your, the things that's carrying your load, fueling that up. I think that was kind of an interesting little connection that the students were making. So I actually like that. I thought that was pretty interesting. All right, so what are we talking about here? We're talking about places that will accommodate you. You can spend the night here. You can definitely get some food there. And there's a lot of economic trade going on here, a lot of activities. And yes, you're fueling up your feeding and watering, your animals, right? So I always like to make the comparison to rest areas on I-95, right? So, because it is what it is. It's a rest area, right? It's a rest area with walls. And of course, the question is why walls, right? Why do you need to wall this? What's going on in here that would, would feel the need to do that? And in a couple of answers usually kind of pop up. We do watch this video in class, and I'll put a link to this on Classroom and on my webpage as well. So you kind of watch this. This video shows you a Caravanserai. That's kind of an old traditional one that kind of went into disrepair, and then they repaired it. I think the architecture is kind of the most important thing you can take or see from that. The one that they're showing you in that video is, I think it's right here. So if you can see where my cursor is, I'll kind of put it down. So it's right here, kind of just to the northwest of where Tehran is, just south of the Caspian Sea, right? So it is a kind of a traditional site for a Caravanserai, right? So in class, we look at this image, and we I asked students to explain the distribution of the Caravanserais on this image, right? So come up with some reasons, come up with identifying a reason why, and then explain, that reason. In class, we usually come up with a number of different ideas. I guess probably some of the most common ones are students identify that in the Middle East there's a kind of greater population density, within the Abbasid Caliphate specifically, compared to Central Asia, right? So that'd be a good identification, right? So not an explanation, but it's an identification of the distribution. Another thing that kids identify correctly is that you can actually see, especially within the Abbasid Caliphate, you can see where the major cities are and how they were connected. That Damascus to Baghdad route, right? That Damascus to Baghdad route is right here. The Damascus to Cairo route, right? You can see here. But there's also routes here that are not purely economic. Like, for example, this Damascus route here, what's going down? We're going into the Arabian Peninsula. So why is that route there, right? If you want to explain the distribution of these, right, can you explain this one, right? This is not done for economic reasons. This is done for a different reason, right? So we bounce some ideas like this in class. Can you identify it, right? So obviously this last one here is the kind of Damascus to Mecca, route. So this is a Hajj route, right? And then later during the, kind of towards the end of our period, actually during most of our period, it'll be, 1260, I guess. After 1260, the Mamluks will be responsible for the security on this route. So, it'll become the Cairo to Damascus route under the Mamluks, right? So, right. So can you identify, some reasons for distribution, right? And then can you explain? So that's kind of things that we talked about in class. And then we did a very simple SAQ, right? After that discussion, explain one factor before 1450 that accounts for the pattern of Caravanserai shown on the map. So you need to be able to identify it, right? Identify a factor that accounts for the pattern, and then explain. So this really needs to be done in no less than 2 sentences. It really needs to be done in 3 sentences. All right, so 3 complete sentences is probably your best chance of getting this one correct. So we did this in class, in almost all my classes. So if you are at home, then you could do this right at home and just email it to me, your response. All right, or you can just bring it in when you return. All right. All right, so in class, we generally ended there in class, and if there was a few minutes left, I gave some of my classes some time to work on their projects, just kind of get together and start that process. So we didn't really get to this activity to find a similarity, right, in these descriptions, right? But you're welcome to kind of pause. This is the first one by Marco Polo, from the Travels of Marco Polo in 1299. And then the second one, right? So the second one is from 1404, right? So this is again another traveler, right? So we're timber, all right? So so you're welcome to kind of do this, and I'll go over some responses tomorrow, right? In tomorrow's video of that, if that's something you want to do, but I'm not grading that or anything like that. All right, so key takeaways. All right, so task verbs and free response questions, right? When you're asked to explain something, like that SAQ, you're asked to explain something, all right? Explain why, explain how. That's not really what we are seeing here, but I think this kind of is an explain why, right? You're not explicitly getting. So you're being asked to analyze the relationship, process, pattern, position, situation, or outcome, right? That's the explain how. The explain why, I guess, which is more of what the question is asking you, requires analysis of motivation or reason for the relationship. So when you answer that SAQ question, right, you're explaining why the pattern of distribution is the way it is, right? You're being asked to analyze motivations for reasons for, right? What's the relationships there, the process, the patterns, the position, situation, or outcome. All right, and these are right from the College Board curriculum framework. All right, that's all for today. Sapriati.